October 2nd, 1930. The first glimmer of dawn barely cuts through the heavy fog that hugs the grounds of San Quentin. Inside the thick walls, the world feels hushed, the usual hum of prison life replaced by the quiet anticipation that comes only when death is on the calendar. Somewhere, keys rattle against iron bars, each jangle marking a passage of time that's quickly slipping away. Down the corridor, a 23-year-old man opens his eyes to the last morning he will ever see. The cell is cold. The thin, government-issued blanket offers no comfort. There's a finality in the air that settles deep in his bones. This is not the start of another day. For Gordon Northcott, today is the end. No more appeals, no more stalling, no more chances for a future that he so often distorted with lies and violence. In less than 12 hours, he'll be standing on a trapdoor with a rope around his neck, a reality that's slowly gnawing at whatever composure he has left. He'd spend his final hours begging, crying, and praying, a far cry from the monster who'd once bragged about killing boys, who'd sat calmly in interrogation rooms and described acts so horrifying they made seasoned lawmen shudder. But would remorse change anything? Would it bring back the Winslow brothers, ages 12 and 10? Would it return the young Mexican boy whose remains were found headless on that California chicken ranch? What goes through a killer's mind when he knows the gallows are waiting? Does he see the faces of those he destroyed, or does he only see himself, the victim of his own making? If you've ever wondered how someone faces their final hours after committing unspeakable acts, stay with me. And if this story makes you think, hit that like button. It helps me bring more untold stories to light. To understand the weight of this moment, why Gordon Northcott is about to die, we need to step back. Not far, just enough to see the darkness he left behind. Northcott was born in Canada in 1906, and by his early 20s, he'd made his way to Southern California with big plans. He bought a small chicken ranch in Wineville, a quiet farming community in Riverside County, where neighbors minded their own business and land stretched out far enough that screams wouldn't carry. It looked like an honest venture, a young man trying to build something. But beneath that surface, Northcott was building something else entirely, a private hell for children. He brought his teenage nephew, Sanford Clark, down from Canada under the promise of work and opportunity. Instead, Sanford became a prisoner. Northcott beat him, abused him, and eventually forced him to participate in crimes so horrific that the boy would carry the trauma for the rest of his life. Between 1926 and 1928, Northcott lured young boys to that ranch, offering rides, small jobs, anything to get them isolated. Once there, he held them captive in the chicken coops, where he sexually assaulted them, tortured them, and ultimately murdered them. The confirmed victims were Lewis and Nelson Winslow, brothers aged 12 and 10, who disappeared in May 1928 on their way home from a yacht club meeting. There was also a young Mexican boy, later identified as possibly Alvin Gauthier, whose head was severed and brought back to the ranch. Northcott ordered Sanford to burn it in a fire pit and crush the skull. Northcott hinted at more, maybe 9 victims, maybe 20, but the full truth died with him. The most famous name linked to the case was Walter Collins, a 9-year-old from Los Angeles whose disappearance in 1928 exposed corruption within the LAPD and later inspired the film Changeling. Northcott was never convicted of Walter's murder, but his mother later confessed to it before retracting her statement. The horror only came to light when Sanford's older sister Jessie visited the ranch and sensed something was terribly wrong. Sanford confided in her, and she went to authorities. Police descended on the property and found shallow graves, scattered bones, personal belongings, and evidence of fires where bodies had been burned to hide the evidence. Northcott fled to Canada with his mother, but they were arrested in September 1928 and extradited back to California. His trial in early 1929 lasted 27 days. The jury convicted him on 3 counts of first-degree murder, and in February, Judge George R. Freeman sentenced him to hang. Now, 20 months later, all appeals exhausted, Gordon Northcott had 1 day left. Death row has a rhythm all its own. Days blur together in the sameness of concrete and steel, punctuated only by the clang of meal trays and the shuffle of guards' boots. But when your execution date is set, time takes on a different quality. Every sunrise becomes a countdown. Every breath feels borrowed. For Gordon Northcott, the final week was a study in contradictions. The man who'd once sat smugly in courtrooms, who'd boasted to police about his victims and spun elaborate stories to control the narrative, was now falling apart. Guards reported watching him cycle through emotions like someone flipping through pages of a book, anger one moment, sobbing the next, then back to denial. Clergy visited him regularly during those last days, hoping to offer spiritual comfort or perhaps extract some final truth. He prayed. He asked for forgiveness. He wept and spoke about God and redemption. But within the same conversation, he'd shift, claiming innocence, insisting the courts had it wrong, that he didn't deserve this fate. Was this genuine remorse surfacing too late, or was it just another performance from a man who'd manipulated everyone around him his entire life? Even the ministers couldn't say for certain. Here's where things get complicated. The man who once bragged about killing up to 9 children, maybe 20, was now sobbing in his cell, insisting he shouldn't die. Which version was real? The predator or the penitent? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Family offered no comfort. His mother, who'd helped him commit at least one of the murders, sat in her own prison cell serving a life sentence. No one was coming to hold his hand. No one was coming to say goodbye. The isolation that he'd once imposed on his victims, luring them away from safety, trapping them where no one could hear them scream, now mirrored back at him in his final days. It's strange, isn't it? How people can be so cruel and crumble when they're held accountable. Have you ever seen someone show remorse only when they're facing consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments. San Quentin operates on protocol. There's a procedure for everything: meal times, yard time, visitation. And when a man is scheduled to die, there's a procedure for that too. Every step is documented, timed, and carried out with cold precision. No room for error. No room for mercy. October 2nd arrives with the same gray fog that had settled over the prison the day before. Guards make their rounds earlier than usual. They know what's coming. So does Northcott. When they unlock his cell just after dawn, he's already awake. Maybe he never slept. His eyes are red, his face drawn. He looks smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what's waiting for him. The last meal is a strange ritual. It's supposed to offer comfort, a final taste of choice in a life that's about to end. San Quentin gave condemned men the option to request whatever they wanted, within reason. There's no detailed record of what Northcott chose that morning, if he ate at all, or if the food just sat untouched on the tray while his stomach twisted in knots. Some men eat. Some can't. Fear has a way of shutting down the body's basic functions. A chaplain arrives mid-morning. Father Joseph McGowan has walked this path with condemned men before, offering prayers and whatever spiritual comfort he can in these final hours. Northcott clings to him, desperate. They pray together, or rather, the chaplain prays while Northcott weeps and mumbles words that might be prayers or might just be pleas. "Will it hurt?" he asks. "Please, will it hurt?" There's no good answer to that question. Hanging, when done correctly, is supposed to be quick. The drop breaks the neck, and death comes almost instantly. But when it's done wrong, when the calculations are off or the rope doesn't catch right, it becomes strangulation. Slow. Agonizing. And Northcott, whether he knows it or not, is about to find out which kind of death awaits him. Around mid-morning, guards bring him clean clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt. Standard issue for men walking to the gallows. They tell him to change. They secure his wrists with leather straps, not tight enough to hurt, but firm enough that he can't bolt or fight back. Not that he could. The terror has taken everything out of him. His legs barely hold his weight. The walk from death row to the execution chamber isn't long, but every step feels like miles. Other inmates, locked in their cells, fall silent as the procession passes. Some whisper prayers. Some don't say anything at all. Northcott is trembling so badly the guards have to support him on either side. "Don't make me walk so fast," he begs. They don't slow down. The schedule doesn't allow for it. At his request, they've agreed to blindfold him. He can't bear to see the gallows, can't face the rope that's waiting. So they tie a dark cloth over his eyes, and the world goes black for Gordon Northcott. All he has left now are sounds: the shuffle of feet, the creak of the wooden platform, the murmur of witnesses gathering to watch him die. The execution chamber at San Quentin isn't a large room. It doesn't need to be. Just enough space for the gallows in the center, rows of wooden benches for witnesses, and the heavy steel door that seals everything inside. By the time Northcott arrives, the room is already full: reporters with notepads, law enforcement officials, a few representatives from the victims' families who wanted to see justice carried out. Everyone is quiet. Waiting. Northcott can barely stand. The guards practically carry him up the 13 steps to the platform, his legs buckling with every movement. He's still blindfolded, still crying, mumbling incoherent words that might be prayers or just sounds of pure terror. The warden, James B. Holohan, stands nearby, watching with the practiced calm of a man who's overseen executions before. This is procedure. This is the law. They position him on the trapdoor, a square outlined in the wooden platform beneath his feet. The noose hangs from above, thick rope coiled and ready. One of the guards adjusts it around Northcott's neck, tightening it just enough to hold but not choke. Not yet. The warden asks if he has any final words. It's customary. Every condemned man gets the chance to speak, to confess, to apologize, to rage, whatever they need to say before the end. Northcott's voice is barely a whisper. A prayer, he begs. Please say a prayer for me. Father McGowan steps forward and begins reciting scripture, his voice steady and calm in the stillness. Northcott sobs through the words, his body shaking so violently the rope sways. In these last seconds, what does a man like Gordon Northcott see? Does he see the faces of Lewis and Nelson Winslow, two brothers who trusted the wrong stranger? Does he see the young Mexican boy whose head he ordered burned to hide the evidence? Does he see Walter Collins, the boy his mother confessed to killing while he stood by? Or does he only see himself, the victim of his own making, the boy who claimed he was abused, the man who blamed everyone else for the monster he became? We'll never know. The hood goes over his head, blocking out the last bit of light. This is the moment where everything becomes real. If you're still watching, I appreciate you being here for these difficult stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because the truth, no matter how dark, deserves to be told. The trap mechanism is simple: a lever, a latch, a heavy trapdoor. When it releases, the condemned drops through the floor, and if everything is calculated correctly, the fall snaps the neck cleanly. Death comes in seconds, maybe a minute at most. That's the theory, anyway. But execution by hanging is as much art as science, and in 1930, San Quentin was still learning. The warden gives the signal. The executioner, a prison official whose name was never made public, pulls the lever. The trapdoor swings open with a metallic clang that echoes through the chamber. Northcott drops. But something goes wrong. The rope length, the knot placement, the angle of the fall, one of these calculations is off. Instead of a quick break, the noose tightens around his throat and he hangs there, suspended strangling. His body convulses. His legs kick. Witnesses in the front rows can hear the wet, choking sounds he makes as he fights for air that won't come. It takes minutes. Long, agonizing minutes. Some witnesses look away. Others sit frozen, unable to process what they're seeing. This was supposed to be justice, clean and final. Instead, it's become something else, something brutal and hard to watch. Warden James Holohan stands stone-faced throughout, but those who worked with him later said he was furious. This wasn't the first botched hanging he'd witnessed at San Quentin, and it wouldn't be the last, but each one weighed on him. He'd spend years advocating for California to switch to lethal gas, arguing that hanging was too unpredictable, too prone to error. In 1937, 7 years after Northcott's death, the state finally listened. But that doesn't help Gordon Northcott. At 10 a.m., or shortly after, depending on which account you trust, the prison doctor steps forward and checks for a pulse. There isn't one. Official time of death is recorded. The body is cut down and carried out of the chamber, and just like that, the Wineville chicken coop murderer is gone. The witnesses file out in silence. Some head straight to telephones to call their editors. This will be front-page news by evening. Others just walk, trying to shake off what they saw. Executions are supposed to bring closure, but closure doesn't feel like this. It feels messy. Unfinished. Back on death row, the other inmates already know. Word travels fast in prison. Some feel relief, one less monster in the world. Others feel something darker. If the state can botch an execution this badly, what does that mean for them when their time comes? Gordon Stewart Northcott's body was eventually claimed and buried, though records of where remain unclear. No marker. No mourners. Just a grave somewhere, holding the remains of a man who destroyed so many lives and died badly trying to escape the consequences. So was justice served? That depends on who you ask. For the families of the Winslow brothers, Lewis and Nelson, who left for a yacht club meeting one afternoon and never came home, Northcott's death might have brought some measure of closure. For the family of the young Mexican boy whose head was brought back to the ranch and burned, maybe it offered a sense that someone was held accountable. But justice is complicated when bodies are incomplete, when some victims are never positively identified, and when a killer takes the full truth to the grave with him. Northcott told different people different numbers. 5 boys. 9. 18. 20. Prison warden Clinton Duffy later wrote that Northcott confessed to killing 18 or 19, maybe 20 young men and boys in their conversations. After the execution, guards found a crudely drawn map in his cell showing the ranch with coffin-shaped boxes and the words, "If you will look here you will find what you want." But in the margin he'd also written, "I am not guilty." Even in death, he couldn't commit to the truth. Which brings us back to that question, was his remorse real? The crying, the praying, the begging in those final hours, was any of it genuine, or was Gordon Northcott performing one last time, trying to rewrite his story as a repentant sinner instead of a sadistic killer? Maybe both things can be true. Maybe he did feel sorry he got caught, sorry he was going to die, sorry his life turned out this way. But that's not the same as understanding the pain he caused. That's not the same as truly seeing his victims as human beings whose lives mattered. Here's what we know for certain: those boys felt terror. They felt pain. They called out for parents who couldn't hear them. And in their final moments, they were utterly alone with a monster who saw them as objects, not children. Northcott's fear on the gallows, that shaking, that sobbing, that desperate plea for the guards to slow down, that was a fraction of what he inflicted on others. So no, his remorse doesn't erase anything. It doesn't balance the scales. But there are lessons here, beyond the horror. Gordon Northcott didn't operate in a vacuum. He manipulated his family, isolated his nephew Sanford, and built his ranch far enough from neighbors that no one thought to question what was happening behind those chicken coops. The boys he targeted were often alone, vulnerable, trusting. He exploited that trust. He counted on people not paying attention. So here's what you can take away from this: evil doesn't always announce itself. It hides behind ordinary faces, ordinary places. If something feels wrong, if someone's behavior sets off alarm bells, if a situation doesn't add up, trust that instinct. Speak up. Ask questions. Check in on people who seem isolated or scared. Sanford Clark's sister Jessie did that. She traveled from Canada because something felt off about her brother's letters, and when she got to that ranch, she pushed past Northcott's lies until Sanford felt safe enough to tell the truth. One voice. One person who refused to look away. That's what broke this case open. That's what stopped Northcott from killing again. What's your take on this case? Do you think remorse in the final hours means anything? Should it? I'd love to hear your perspective. Leave a comment below. And if this story moved you or made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we keep these victims' memories alive and learn from the past. Gordon Stewart Northcott's 24 hours ended on a gallows at San Quentin, but the scars he left behind lasted lifetimes. The Winslow family buried 2 empty caskets because there wasn't enough of Lewis and Nelson left to recover. Walter Collins' mother, Christine, spent years searching for her son, never getting the closure she deserved. And Sanford Clark, the nephew who was forced to witness and participate in unspeakable horrors, carried that trauma until his death in 1991. These are the names that matter. Lewis Winslow, Nelson Winslow, Alvin Gotthe, Walter Collins, and the others whose names we'll never know. Their stories matter. That's why we're here. Thank you for watching True Crime Diaries. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop questioning.